I was also thinking about what new adventure can I do to keep building this other career I've got, the adventure career. And so I planned this trip and I saw it as a sequel when I came up with it. And I was probably thinking much too much along the lines of what will look good as a sequel, which is a really bad way to think about a journey. And it was off. I like the idea of trying to get home from somewhere distant, but this time instead of cycling, I'm going to walk. So I flew from Hong Kong to Mongolia, and then I tried to walk home. So the first trip was cycling home from Siberia. Second trip was walking home from Mongolia. And as I planned this trip, I suppose the moderate success I'd had from the first journey went to my head a little bit. And I was 33, 34, I think, when I was planning this. And there were a lot of little commercial opportunities that came up surrounding this journey. So I got a chance to do another TV show, which I managed to persuade Nat Geo to commission it before I went. I got another book deal. I had newspapers like the South China Morning Post said, can you write a weekly article for us? I had managed to get loads of sponsors for all my gear. I had radio interviews. I was trying to raise lots of money for the charity. And I basically said yes to everything. I was like, yes, yes. And I went with this friend cameraman to Mongolia. And even the day we set off, we'd been delayed about 2 months because all the commercial stuff got a bit out of hand and took up all our time. We set off at the start of November when it was getting pretty cold in Mongolia. And I was so overwhelmed, even on day one, because I just had way too much stuff. I got so stressed out. Dealing with all these kind of commercial interests was very stressful. There was quite a lot of politics in these companies, which I was too naive and young to understand what was going on. And then the whole of that journey, it was, on one level, it was a beautiful walk, 6 months walking through the Gobi Desert and through the middle of China, really cool route along the Great Wall, along the Yellow River. But on another level, it was like super stressful, dealing with all these different things. We had far too much to do. I wasn't spending enough time looking after myself. We were walking like 35, 40 kilometers a day, filming for 2 hours a day. We had problems with our cameras. I got injured. It all just became super stressful and turned into this big slog. We had these like 25-kilogram rucksacks on. It was a journey where I learned how not to do a journey. And it was beautiful on one level. I love China. I think it's a fantastic place to go traveling. But on another level, it exacerbated my insecurities. I think that trip increased that sense of imposter syndrome that this journey had turned into such a difficult one. So it was a big lesson about don't try and do too many things on a journey. Do it for the right reasons and all these sort of things. Yeah. And then I did another book, another TV show. Wasn't as happy with either of those, but it was great for my overall career to do those. But it did take me a couple of years. I'd say after that trip, I felt really down after that trip because it just felt a bit of a crush to my confidence. And I'd expected the opposite from it. Yeah, it was a hard one.
Yeah. So even though you were able to complete the journey and you got everything published, just because of your own internal, how you went through the journey and how you executed it, you felt that it's disappointing or not what you would have wished it went like?
Yeah, I think I'd say on two levels. One was, and I talk about this in my speeches sometimes, talking about prioritization. I think the thing about prioritization is basically we often end up with way too many priorities, which basically means we don't have any priorities because we're trying to do too many things. And I had 10 different things I was trying to do on this journey, including a big walk, TV show, book, all these different things. And that meant, sometimes I say, if you have 10 priorities on your list, if you wrote down the top 10 things you want to achieve this year, would you prefer to have a B- for all 10 of those? Or would you prefer to have an A+ for the top 3? So if you have a choice, B- for 10 or A+ for 3. And more in life, I think it's better to get the A+ for 3, do 3 things really well rather than 10 things like, okay. And so that's what happened with me. I ticked all the boxes, but none of them really I was proud of. So that was on one level, but on the deeper level, the sort of personal level, I think all that sort of insecurity I'd carried, I was one of those people who just carries this stuff quite heavily. It all got amplified by this journey. When I initially thought of the journey, I thought it was going to solve all of my kind of inner struggles. So yeah, it was tough. It was tough. And after that, we went through various dramas going on in our lives, all kind of first world problems. But Christine had a big burnout from the charity she was working with, the charity we were helping. So I then had to take that over, which was super stressful. We were trying to have kids and turned out we were subfertile. So that was like super stressful and emotionally very hard. And we just felt a really dark season in life for those couple of years. And then, this is all, I'm ashamed in a way of how things happen, but this is how I dealt with it. I started thinking of doing another expedition, and I dreamt up this even crazier one, which was through this desert in Western China called the Taklamakan, which is, it's not very well known in the world. It's interestingly unfamous because it's one of the biggest sand deserts in the world. In China, it's well known. It used to be called, in ancient times, it was called the Sea of Death. More the kind of colonial explorers called it the Abomination of Desolation. And sometimes it's translated as whoever goes in won't come out. So it's this like 1,000 kilometers of sort of deadly sand dunes. And I got this idea in my head, I'm going to try and walk across it alone. And again, in my sort of deepest part of me, and I wasn't even completely aware what was going on, but I think I just thought, if I can prove myself by being the first person ever to walk across solo across this desert, because nobody ever done it solo before, if I can prove myself, that will solve all my problems. It will solve all this inner turmoil I'm feeling. It will solve my career worries. It will solve everything. And then when we were just, and Christine's a very wonderful, supportive wife. She was supportive of this. She said, yeah, I see you need to do this. And I trust that you're not going to die. I trust your judgment on that. And then we got pregnant shortly before I was going to go, which is the best news possible. But probably all the ladies watching this are going to think you total science. But we decided with Christine's support, she said, I still think you need to do it. And I said, right, let's do it before the baby comes. So I went off and I did this mad expedition through this desert. Loads of things went wrong. It was a kind of really hard thing. I didn't actually end up calling it a success because I ended up having to walk along the edge of the desert for about 20%. So I couldn't call it a first solo crossing. But it turned into this amazing adventure, very hard, very scary at times. But somehow out of that process, it was actually one particular moment when I just had to detour from the middle of the desert to the edge because everything had gone wrong. I was going to have to walk along the edge for a bit, which meant I knew I wasn't going to get a record on this journey, which is what I'd originally hoped for. And I spoke to Christine on the phone. And I said, you might as well just give up. It's all, I'm such a loser. And she said, look, every obstacle you faced on this journey, like flooded rivers, massive sand dunes, all these things that have gone wrong, every time you faced them, you've done your best. You've got back up and you've kept going. You got knocked down, you got back up, you kept going. So we can't control everything that happens in life. We can't always control everything and achieve what we originally wanted to achieve. All we can do is get back up every time we're knocked down and keep going and keep doing our best. And that's what you've been doing. So just keep doing that. Keep doing your best. Keep going. Find a way back in. You can finish this thing. And something just clicked. It's a bit like when you're in therapy and just suddenly the penny drops and you're like, oh yeah, it's not about the achievement. That's not what life's about. The achievements don't really matter. What it's about is when you get knocked down, you get back up and you keep doing your best. That's really what it's about. And it just clicked. And so for the rest of that journey, that was every day. It was like literally almost every, moment. I was just saying, just do your best. Don't worry when you get knocked down. Just get up, do your best, And I did that. And I managed to get back onto my original route, get to the end of the desert, lots of more crazy adventures. I couldn't call it like a pure crossing. I could call it a sort of crossing. But it was one of my favorite adventures. And strangely, I just felt psychologically very healed is all I can say. Like a lot of those demons, that imposter syndrome, it all got really healed on that journey. And so I came back from that journey and Christine said she could hear it in my voice. I came back quite a different person, much more at peace with myself, not completely. I've still got a few things to work through. And then about 6 weeks after that, we had our baby. And that's obviously started the next adventure, which has been the most wonderful thing. And then we had another baby. So I've got 2 babies. Anyway, so it was like that journey finally did what I needed all along, which was to deal with this sense of imposter syndrome and so on inside. But it wasn't through succeeding. It was through failing and getting back up. That was what did it for me, which is quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's one thing I've actually talked about before, that you need to focus on the journey and not the destination. And that's where you're going to get the most benefits and the most satisfaction. If you're only worried about where you're trying to get to your target or your goal, you miss everything that's going on along the way.